Dawes from the Anglican Alliance, and a special guest, Rodrigo Espucia, who is working with the Anglican Alliance on the Communion Forest, among other things. So um, let me just start by saying that I think you all know that the Anglican Alliance is one of the charities that the Canadian Compass Rose supports directly in the Communion. The Anglican Alliance was launched in 2011 by the recommendation of the 2008 Lambeth Conference, and it serves to connect, equip, and share learning and resources amongst Anglican churches and agencies across the global communion in responding to human need, promoting justice and peace, and safeguarding creation. So we're very happy to have with us today Rob Dawes, who has been the executive director of the Anglican Alliance since I think October or November of last year. And he joined the Alliance, bringing over 20 years of experience in community development across the UK, Tanzania, Zambia, Honduras, and globally across the Anglican Communion. Prior to this role, he was the Director of Development at Mothers Union, where he led work enabling members worldwide to create sustainable faith-driven change in their communities. He's been an active contributor to the Anglican Alliance since it began and helped to shape its focus on asset-based church and community transformation, and also served on its global COVID-19 task force. He has been a visiting lecturer at the University of East London, teaching project design and management to master's students. He lives in Kent in England, but is joining us today from Nairobi, where he is currently visiting. Rodrigo, who's also joining us, is joining us from Brazil. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rob. The expectation here is that Rob is going to give us a presentation and then be available for any questions or comments that any of you may have. Over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Mark. Can you all hear me okay? Brilliant. Brilliant. If at any point you can't or something goes wrong, please wave frantically. And if I suddenly vanish, I will do my best to come back in, even if that's off a phone. I'm currently in a large campsite with very nice tents in Nairobi, having meant to be on a I should have been in Jerusalem on Tuesday. But obviously the world has changed, and so we change our plans and we adapt and we find campsites with very fast internet, but not very good lighting. So it's really good. Everyone calls me Rob. I'm from the Anglican Alliance for Development, Relief and Advocacy. I think one of the first things to say is a big thank you for the years of support. I can look back in the files and I can see various different things that really seminal, really important pieces of work that were funded by the Canadian Compass Rose and Rachel Carnegie, my predecessor, also spoke about how important you are to us and how valuable that support is. So we still talk to each other and communicate, and she's kind of a supporter from just up outside of the screen, which is so valuable to have and so useful. So I don't know how much, Mark, your introduction to the Anglican Alliance was really good. Thank you for that. So we were set up after that Lambeth conference that Mark mentioned. There was a real concern around, there are lots of different Anglican development relief advocacy agencies around the world, but there was a real concern about, well, how do we all work together and how do we work with dioceses and bishops and the local Anglicans around the world? And there was a real strength of opinion that they didn't need another agency. There's enough of those. There's in fact, as Anglicans, we do quite well. We've got quite a few of them. So we were formed to, first of all, bring hope, and that's what I hope I can do this evening. We're going to talk about a couple of things. Some of them are a little bit dark, but I think that the change that we bring really does bring hope. We also were meant to be there to help connect and inspire and equip and release individuals, organizations, dioceses, different groups to work together, but always looking at best practice and sharing best practice. In fact, one of the earliest pieces of funding I can see that you provided helped them to dig down into some of their best practice, some of the best practice models that we use. And that's why I was so attracted to working for the Anglican Alliance, is because of the way in which they work. I think is the only way that development really actually does work. Um, so one of our other key principles is that no one is left alone. So we do disaster coordination. One of the reasons in that Lambeth conference in 2009, one of the bishops that had a horrendous disaster in their diocese, and he said nobody came, nobody checked how we were, no one came and provided any support. So we do a lot of that. Making sure we've got a team who do disaster preparedness. When I say team, uh, there's two or three of us who get involved in it, and there's a guy called Nicholas who's based here in Nairobi who looks after that. We're quite a small team, but we're very light, we're very agile, and we work in a kind of very flat organizational structure where we all support each other as well. If you're into organizational development, you could describe us as a teal organization. So we also do disaster preparedness work. And a great example of this that I love is in Vanuatu on Boxing Day, I think. No, uh, Christmas Eve, there was an earthquake in Vanuatu in 2024. They'd done their disaster preparedness work, been through the course, and sure enough, in 2 or 3 days, they sent off their application for what they needed, and very quickly, a boat left Australia with the things that they needed up to take it up to Vanuatu. And in terms of churches' responses to disasters, which I've spent a lot of time looking at, kind of sometimes quietly holding your head in your hands. That's lightning fast. And it's like it's really amazingly fast. We also spend a lot of time. We don't do things to people, and we don't really do things with people. What our real focus? Well, we do things with people, but by releasing them into their ability to do what they need. So a great example of this, and in fact, looking back, you guys funded this, was we did the Agents of Change course on Papua New Guinea. And one of the great stories that I love is that they together as a group after the Agents of Change, they designed a project. They got some funding from different places and they built themselves a village hall. And then with the money that they got from the village hall, they supported and started a local nursery school for themselves in Papua New Guinea. So that's all through one facilitator who sat through a load of training and then taking his community together. Really exciting stuff, really releasing people's potential. But I think it'd be foolish of me to not recognize that since Christmas, or even since about October when the Archbishop, November when he resigned, the world's just kind of cranked up the crazy. Things have got really difficult. I know that you're where you guys are, you have also experienced that. I was in the States in late February and um, watching your president, your prime minister, rebut Donald Trump with real dignity and real kind of common sense against some of the craziness. And from there on, things have just, in terms of development and in terms of conflict, things have got worse and worse. And again, I'm sitting in Nairobi because it's just not safe for me to fly to Jordan or to go to Jerusalem at this point. But I think during these times when the amount of development assistance that's available is massively reducing. When USAID was closed down almost overnight. In fact, I was up in a diocese 2 days ago, and by the diocesan office, on its side was the USAID program sign, just left on its side. They'd obviously pulled it out, and it was, I don't know, going to get turned into scrap metal or something. But it was a very stark reminder of how quickly things have changed in the last couple of months. Um, but during this, I think that really does make the church a really exciting place to be, and a real place, space for hope. Um, I think the church is one of the few organizations left that really can challenge narratives and say and speak truth to power and just say that's just not true. That's not right. Um, I think the church at this point is a really exciting organization to be part of and to be allowed to work with is fantastic. And also when we do development and we use the right approaches, the church is incredibly effective and incredibly efficient. Um, but it also one of our the other key thing is when we get it right. And I talk as an Anglican here, fellow Anglican here myself. We enable people to be valued and to be seen, and that is super powerful and super important. Um, yeah. But with the key thing that we're always looking for is that connectedness and connecting people, but also making effective practical change. So this isn't, we're not just having nice conversations. We're talking about, okay, how does this then turn into reality for other people? Or how are they released to turn it into reality? Um, so tonight I was asked to bring three things for you guys to listen to and talk about and to consider. Uh, and I was going to bring you the Communion Forest, and then Indigenous Connected Advocacy piece of work, and then a piece of work around transforming masculinities. And I'll just go through them one at a time. Um, so the Communion Forest is the first one I'll quickly talk about. It's it's on its third birthday, and it's really flourishing. It's what it really is a space where people can be connected, kind of equipped and inspired around ecosystem conservation, restoring and tree growing and carbon sequestration. Um, it's also really strongly linked in, as everything is to spirituality and faith. And I think my favorite example of this is the Philippines. So about 3 months ago, I was talking to one of our our facilitator in the Philippines. There's about 13 of us all in. And she said, "Oh, we've got the mangrove project going, and we're doing it next week. And we hope to plant about 20,000 mangroves over 2 days, mangrove tropicals over 2 days." And just like, oh, that's awesome. Gay, tell us more about it. And she's saying, well, we know there's an island and where they need to replace their mangroves because it fights against first of all typhoons. There are very effective mangroves to stop typhoons, and there are more and more typhoons, unfortunately. It also helps to maintain stop basically islands getting washed away, and with sea level rises as well, it really protects against them. But they've done it by getting the local community involved, the local government involved, the local church involved. And I think in the photo I even saw some scouts, um, some Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. And they said, Gay said, we think it's going to take about 2 days to do all this, but everyone turned up. And it was done by the first morning, 20,000 poppies planted. And that just gets me really excited because that's a huge piece of work, but it's owned, loved, and will be protected by the community that it's been put together by. Um, we have we also, so the expressions of the communal forest just continue to grow, which is so exciting. Recently, I was helping Elizabeth Perry, Dr. Elizabeth Perry, do a presentation at Westminster Abbey about it, and she said, "Can you stick these on the wall?" And the pile of different expressions, A4 pieces of paper, was about this thick, and it's just phenomenal. People have really changing how they think about their environment with their church. And through the services they do. So often now you see a lot of people at confirmations, they'll hand out trees and they'll all go and plant a tree. Um, is so our 3-year vision currently, and Rodrigo was with us because we met together as a team, as a community forest team. There's Rodrigo, myself, Rachel, Elizabeth, a lady called Rachel Mash, who works for the Anglican um, Environment Network, and we've got one comms person on a day a week called Irene, and Nicholas, who also does the disaster stuff. He does a tiny bit on this. And we all just sat together and said, okay, what's worked, what hasn't, what's the plan, where do we feel God's calling us? Um, and we've now got another vision for another 3 years, to expand, to continue to grow, to keep that enthusiasm going. One of the parts of it is for every diocese to have a piece of the communion forest in their diocese and to encourage that. And Rodrigo, I'll tell you, we had big success with that after you left, which is very exciting, but also to develop and ramp up the advocacy work around it, particularly for forest protection. Um, we obviously link into the COP, also into oceans as well, but also protecting the protectors as well, advocating for their protection, which is what some of the work that Rodrigo does. He's also, he said at the beginning, he's also a human rights lawyer. Um, and also advocating and starting to look at greenwashing and sequestering. We've seen a bit of that this week, and it is quite challenging to see things that when on the surface you think that sounds great, and then you look underneath it and you start asking questions, and it's not great. It's really bad. It's people taking advantage of poor people. Um, but anyway, um, one of the things we are looking to do is we're going to pilot a model farm um, in McQueen Diocese. We started off with a pilot of 1 hectare of sequestering and the local church planting. That ought to go up to about 35 hectares. The bishop is really keen. He's got a load of land. He's really keen to have a model farm that enables both to show biodiversity increasing. A lot of tree species in Kenya are reducing. There's not as many as there were, and some of the carbon credit schemes are encouraging people to plant trees, but maybe only 2 or 3 species, and 2 or 3 species of fast-growing trees that they can take advantage of the products from afterwards. So we also want to tie into that. He really wants to tie into the spirituality into that, but also how do you do it in a semi-arid zone? And we had our various experts with us, and we all sat around in the room and discussed how are we going to do that and do that well. So there's a really big plan, and that then becomes a centerpiece to be able to share and something to share more hope in a more structured way. But I'm rapidly running out of time, and I still need to talk to you about Indigenous connected advocacy.
I
I
wouldn't
know
worry
you,
about the 30-minute time limit. If you should go as long as your content is there.
Mark. I can go all night. It's exciting stuff. Um, yeah, we're going for lunch and in a meeting. No. So Indigenous theology, Indigenous connected advocacy. I know that for having met some of your bishops and archbishops and listened to them and learned a lot, about Indigenous theology in the past, that you guys, for you guys, this is a very lived reality in Canada around some of the issues that Indigenous communities bring. This is not my area of expertise, but I don't, it doesn't have to be, because I've got brilliant people like Rodrigo and Paolo and various other people who all work together around this. I think you're probably all really aware how invisible those communities can be, how they are some of the most vulnerable people that we work with. And the whole issues around identity and being able to access resources fairly. We know that the rates of suicide in Indigenous communities is about 2 times the normal average, which is brutal. And we know that the impact of murder and violence against them, and sexual violence as well against women, is from Indigenous groups is way higher than averages, and it's very uncomfortable um, reading to look at those statistics. Um, what we're looking to do there, and we are already doing, is connecting Indigenous voices and groups together, particularly around land and ocean things. We know that lots of Indigenous voices will have champions and they'll work in different areas, but they're not always very as well connected up as they can be, which gives them more power and more strength. So in 2024, how we connect those voices to make powerful levers for advocacy is effectively what we're doing and what we're trying to do more of. In November 2024, we had a big meeting in Brazil that brought together a lot of different Indigenous communities and leaders. We'll have the Tapiri, which is, the COP that's happening in Brazil, which Rodrigo has been part of in the background, making sure that even before the COP starts, like 6 months, 7 months, 8 months before it will be 8 months before the COP starts, the religious leaders and groups have got together and they've got their messages ready so that when the COP starts, everyone's ready to do it and they can do the prep work beforehand and the theology work. Anyway, so the Tapiri's coming up. And then the Philippines next year, we want to bring again those groups together, but we really want to bring in groups from the Pacific and Melanesia and some other island states that they're really often forgotten. So the outcomes, we obviously want them to be more connected, more communities taking those challenge, to be blunt, and this is slightly uncomfortable as we are all white, kind of challenging and bringing a new way of thinking, challenging that narrative that is so often controlled by, at the moment, by largely by a white colonial imperial narrative history. And that is kind of, that theology is quite extractive. And yeah, bringing that change, but also changing the theology, because there is, again, we just talked about community forest, the eco-theology and the way of seeing the earth and valuing the earth rather than it being a commodity to be extracted. How we change ourselves as a church around that is a big part of our work. And you can start to already see that all of our work kind of all connects up and touches, and it supports itself and supports itself together, which is very much how our team works as well. I think the Alliance for that really brings the value in breaking down the silos and bringing people together globally. And we've got Rodrigo and we've got Paolo as two regional and global facilitators. We've got a lady over in Fiji called Karen, who does a lot of disaster preparedness stuff. She's fantastic, but she also brings in that Fijian, that oceanic influence, and that connects those groups together. And also drawing us all into a really different way of looking at the earth, the Bible, and how our day-to-day things that we don't even see and consider how we're thinking. And I love that. I get challenged a lot, and I spend a lot of time thinking about things, and that's awesome. But it's always done with love and kindness, um, and it keeps me moving to a new place. The last one is um, yeah, challenging. Richard, go for it. Richard's gone. Oh, he just waved. Shall I keep going? Is that a good mark? Okay. Um, is around changing male. Sorry, a second. Come on. Is around transforming masculinities. And there's a great quote here that I love from the UN Secretary General in 2025, um, where he says, the poison of patriarchy is back, um, mutating. We know that around 1 in 3 women globally experiences physical or sexual violence. And nothing really, and this is one of the things that frustrated me when I worked at the Mothers Union. All the SDGs are changing, and things are happening, and things are getting better generally. And some of them you see massive leaps and bounds with. Gender, is really not changing that much. Um, I mean, the use of pornography is rising, and it normalizes violent, objective views of both men and women. And the churches often we avoid talking about sex, talking about porn, or talking about gender-based violence. But that silence really allows all of those horrible things to continue to persist. Um, and so why this matters to the church? I think gender justice kind of is a discipleship issue. And it's not a women's issue. I think for so long it's seen as a women's issue. But I know that as a guy who's married with 2 kids, and used to be part of the Mothers Union, this is also about us as men, as well, and what we do and what we allow to do and what we don't speak out about. Um, and I think those harmful, I mean, we look at Andrew Tate, we look at other things, those harmful concepts of masculinity often hurt everyone. They damage men, they damage families, and they damage communities. And if we don't kind of really address this as a church, we start to become quite irrelevant, as we're unable to kind of speak into people's those lived realities that we're kind of aware of, that are behind closed doors, and we get a sense of, but we're just not really challenging enough. Um, Those saying that, the Anglican Consultative Council has called repeatedly for action on this gender justice, including the roles of men and boys. And again, this is again about transforming unjust structures, um, just like the work with the Indigenous work as well. So I'll kind of proposal around this, and there's plenty of really good theology and great research that people have done around, things like all people are creating God's image, Genesis. There's no male or female, Galatians, servant leadership, and just how Jesus redefines that power through his humility, and how we make our churches for ourselves, places of justice, reconciliation, and mutual respect. So, as ever, we can have a nice long theological conversation about that, but how practically are we going to change it? So we're looking to create a faith-based program for Anglican men, clergy and lay, to rethink masculinities in light of the gospel. There's a lot of stuff. I spent a lot of time with Mothers Union doing GBV, sexual violence and safeguarding stuff, and a lot of it comes down to people deliberately misreading the Bible to maintain the patriarchy. Also to enable us to address power. It's about power and identity. A lot of our stuff is about power and identity, but also culture. No culture is stuck. All of our cultures are changing, and we influence those cultures as individuals and as groups. Again, why is the church so exciting? Because we can influence culture. And around, gender-based violence, peer pressure, pornography, but also creating a space for men to be vulnerable, honest, and transformed. So that's a we're looking at we've already got some of the pieces on the jigsaw on the table. We've got Mandy Marshall, we've got Dominic Misolo, who I came across working for the Mothers Union. He's a survivor from Kenya. Um, and he runs the most amazing organization focusing on gender-based violence as a man. He's a bit of a rare thing, but he's brilliant. But they're looking at doing a residential workshops and then followed up with a number of um, online sessions as well. So lots of practical tools, theological resources, and training, not training necessarily, but allowing male leaders to have an experience where these things can be reflected. Um, yeah, we know that the outcomes of this will hopefully enable men to challenge harmful norms and reduce, for example, pornography use or gender-based violence, and have healthier, and this is what we all want is really is healthier family relationships and shared household responsibilities. Um, yeah, and the final bit, the answer to the UN's Secretary General's quote is the antidote is action, and that's what he finished his quote with. So not only is it rising, but we can challenge it and we can push back and change things through action. So those are our three things. Slightly rattled through rather quickly, but I hope they kind of enable us to have a bit of a conversation. Rodrigo, the bishop, was so excited to he just started talking about his land and it just took off. And yeah, brilliant. You missed a brilliant end to the session. So that's all kind of gently all been agreed, which is so exciting. So we've got something practical for our vision as well. Anyway, over to you guys. You must have questions, thoughts, questions.
Well, thank you very
Rodrigo,
much.
did
Oh,
I
sorry,
miss
go ahead.
anything? Sorry, Rodrigo, did I miss anything? Is there anything you want to add or say?
Actually, not Rob. The way you see it, you highlighted the most important aspects of our work, especially when you say we give visibility to those who are not able or who are invisible, and also the connection we can find in the indigenous communities, indigenous groups, when we are together fighting for our rights and our land and our perspectives on the world. So thank you very much. If I may add a testimony, I would. There's something that really it made me really happy because that's the thing. There's a community, a church community. It's located in central Brazil. It's located in the state of Palmas, in the state of Tocantins, in the capital of Palmas. So the capital city. It's a brand new city. It was started in the 80s when they split the state into two. And the story is this. The community, they got a piece of land just downtown from the government in order to build a church. But they did not have the money so far. And they have been fundraising for a few years to get the money together in order to bring the trees down in the piece of land and build a church. But they also do a great work with HIV people, those who are living with HIV. They do this health work. It's amazing health work in that place, but not in the land that was supposed to be the church. When we started talking about communion forest with the priest, he came up and said, okay, we have been fundraising for quite a few years to build our church, to build a new church. But to build our church, we would have to chop down the trees. And then he asked, do you think we could connect our health work with those living with HIV and sustainable environmental education in this piece of land and our spirituality so we could worship together, but also respecting nature and connecting this health program and activities we have as a whole to the why? Yeah, sure. Of course you can. So what did the community decide? They decided not to bring the trees down, not to chop the trees, but to organize their spirituality around the piece of land. And they invited the local schools, the local public schools, to identify each individual tree in the place. So they're using it as an educational program for children, but also connecting with health, not only human health, but the health of the environment and spirituality. And that for me is a very inspiring story because the community as a whole decided to do a different use of the land they have, not destroying the nature, but integrating the nature in their spirituality, in their worship, and in their health work and education for sustainability and for children. That really inspires me because that's what we're trying to do, to inspire people to do things in a different way, to inspire people to act and to protect and to restore and to preserve. So I'd just like to add this testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, both Rob and Rodrigo. That was a very inspiring discussion of the things that you're both involved in. And I have to say, in the Compass Rose Society, we often see ourselves as a fundraising organization, and that's really what our core purpose is. But it's so important for us to hear the things that the money is actually being used for and the ways in which the communion as a whole is um, doing things around the world that are of importance and value to people around the world. So thank you both very much. And at this point, if anyone has any questions, I'd open the floor to questions. I should also say before I do that, that we are recording this, and one of the things that we do with our members is we tell them about the recordings of these lunch and learns that are available, and people view them at a time that is convenient for them. So sometimes lunchtime is not a great time for a bunch of people, and so they view these things at a later time. So um, don't be discouraged by the number of people here. There will be others who will be seeing this message over the course of the next few weeks. So with that, I turn it over. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Rob or Rodrigo? Okay, seeing none. Um, I thank you both very much. We very much, speaking for myself and I think for the others, I very much enjoyed hearing what you had to say. And it is of real value for us to be able to hear the work that the Anglican Alliance is doing around the world, and brought home especially today with one of our speakers being in Nairobi and another one in Brazil. So thank you both very much, and we look forward to hearing more about the work of the Alliance over the coming years. Thank you, and goodbye.
Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you
Really
very
appreciate
much.
it.